Hello, it's David. Now in October last year, Exxos 4 member Mr. Bomber Millsy organised a computer show down in Hampshire which he titled Cyberlegends. It was basically a get-together for Exxos 4 users to come and display their machines, talk to each other in person and generally have a bit of an ease up. It was quite Atari-centric given the origins of the Exxos forum, but not excessively so, and plenty of other machines were on display. It was, by general consensus, a great success. Have a look at my video from that event, linked up here, if you've not done so already. Anyway, this year, Phil C decided to put his hand up, and an early October heatwave saw STs, Amigas, souped-up Spectrums, CPCs, MSXs, Jaguars, Electrons and all sorts descend on Northampton in England's East Midlands. I couldn't really film or exhibit this year as I was babysitting solo, but I did manage to record the keynote presentation from the Phoenix team's Richard, better known as Icky. And to be honest, I only managed that because of the very kind childminding help provided to me by Meg and Lucy, two of the long-suffering other halves who had made the trip. Presumably they were dead keen on seeing what the inside of a Northamptonshire parish hall's kitchen looks like. Still, all the cool people are in the kitchen at parties, aren't they? Anyway, with thanks to Exxos for the second camera feed, here's Icky's presentation on the work the Phoenix team are undertaking to use FPGAs to replace the ST's custom chips. Not only for replacing failing components, but to allow genuinely new ST builds and also possibly to expand the ST's abilities in the future. I'll link in Exxos' recording and Icky's slides down below as well.
Right, my name's Richard, also known as Icky on the forum. I'm here today to basically talk about FPGAs and how we're using them with the Phoenix platform. Just to let you know, I finished these slides last night. I haven't run through them, just going to wing it, so let's see how we go with these. So we're going to talk about FPGAs. We've got them on display here. I'm going to talk about a few things and bits and pieces that we've been doing with people on the forum and the way that we want to sort of move forward with this sort of path as well. So let's sort of start here. I've actually shamelessly stolen the slides I had from last Cyberlegends. This is really just about the ST. Effectively, this is the spec, the various, its release date, how many units were sold, and so forth. I'm not going to go into all the details because most of you don't know all these sort of stats. You can just pull them off the wiki and so forth. But it's just to set the scene that this is the Atari ST that we're actually looking at. And this is where we start to get into the sort of fun bit. So there are custom chips within the ST that Atari created. So there's various different ones out there. There's the glue, which is basically for all the different logic of all the different chips to bring them together and coordinate them. There's basically a shifter, and that shifter is used to do bitmap graphics out so that we can actually see what we're actually using our systems for. There's a Blitter chip, which basically shifts data around in nice blocks. And then there's a memory management unit, and then there's also a DMA chip as well, direct memory access chip. These are all custom chips that Atari created. They are difficult to get hold of unless you sort of scavenge a machine or pay a lot of dollars or pounds or whatever to actually get them off of eBay or Exxos store or other areas. And these are the ones that we're going to start to look at as part of the FPGA journey because they are sort of short in supply. So we were sort of thinking, how can we actually create them in FPGA as a standalone and have them as replacements so that we can sort of put them into the systems and keep the systems still running and so people can use them and so forth. And there's more. There are more custom chips because there's an STE as well. So the STE kit was the enhanced version. They basically did what they call the ST-GST MCU, where they took the glue and the MMU and they shoved it into one to sort of downsize the sort of die and make it sort of smaller. And then there's also the GST shifter, which is the shifter, but they added more palette colors. They added some DMA sound to it, and there's also a microwire interface, which is sort of like the SPI sort of interface you have today, but it's like a legacy type of version of that. Okay. So our FPGA journey, we basically started to do various different things with this. It's been a long journey. It's been over sort of 3 or 4 years, something like that. Exxos sort of kick-started a lot of this sort of messing around with various different things, especially like translators for the buses between 5 volt and 3.3 volt, because a lot of the FPGAs actually run at the lower voltage and so forth. But to do this, we needed a dev platform. We've got several in front here, and what that was to take an existing STFM, pull out the sockets of the MMU, the glue, the blitter, and basically enable us to plug things in. And we could plug in the original chips, or we could plug in an FPGA board to basically do some testing. And we've also got the same thing on the H5 boards as well. You can actually plug things in there as well. So the chips we started to FPGA, shifter, MMU, glue, and blitter. And let's talk about those in a little bit more detail. So let's talk about the shifter. The shifter evolution. The initial development was done by S. Monson on the forum. He took one of these sort of FPGA dev boards. It's actually the board on the far sort of left, the big board. Added a sort of an adapter board to be able to plug it into the shifter. And it basically was a DVI out. He basically got it going using Igor's core. Igor is another member on the forum who's quite prevalent in the sort of core world of the ST. And he was able to get it sort of working and had a few sort of iterations going with Exxos and a few others to sort of get it going. But then I got my hands on the schematic and started to really push it down into sizes. So I wanted to take it from this dev board down into smaller sizes and also make it fit for the H4 and H5 boards, but have an HDMI out. So when you plug this in, the HDMI socket pops out the monitor port, so you just plug it straight in. And then the eventual goal was the one at the bottom, which is basically plug that chip into where the shifter chip is in the CAN and the original STFM, and have a ribbon cable with the HDMI connector out, so that you can actually have the HDMI out of your original STFM. So we're looking at various different options. They're still in development at the moment, but you can see the sort of direction we're going with the boards and so forth. So let's talk about some of the things and issues that we're having with this shifter. There's a lot going on this screen at the moment. So even though the core works and it shows the GEM desktop nicely, resolution's great, and you can see various different things, we started to run the demo closure from Trode. And we started to see that there was a lot of bit plane shifting and things not quite working. And we started seeing the stuff that you can see on the left-hand side where it wasn't drawing very well. You can see sort of the syncs going sort of wrong. And then we started to play around with the sort of timings and the counters, the bit plane. You start to see it starting to come back into sort of line. We're not 100% there yet, but we're starting to work with Igor on his core to help sort of make sure this is 100% cycle accurate and working correctly with this. So you can see that we've still got a little way to go. A bit like we did the Blitter, but we're getting there. Okay. Right. So the Phoenix shifter board has quite a few features. It's not just a shifter. We can do a little bit more on that. So we've actually got a few things in here. So it does full support for all resolutions. Now what we mean by that is if you have a little toss patch, you can actually change the resolutions from low to medium to high, back to medium, without actually pulling out the sort of high-res monitor cable. So you're able to actually do that. And I think if I just click here, here's an example of it. So we've actually got a patch toss here. It's one we actually call Phoenix Oz, which we've got here. We've just added a few extensions. You see we're in medium, click on high, it changes the resolution. You're now in high, so there's no pulling out cables like you do on a normal ST, and you can go back to the other resolutions as well. So that's one advantage that you can actually do with that with a little sort of toss patch. Other things that we have as well added to this is there's sort of like scan lines, so you can actually have that sort of CRT look as a bit of a gimmick, but yeah, some people like to do that, so you can add that on. We've also got audio. So what we've done is we've added an audio mixer chip, similar to the one that's sort of like in the Atari ST, but we're allowing you to, we want to be able to sort of have it so you can mix in the YM audio, along with other things that you may have, like on the H5 board, where you can sort of plug in a MIDI sound card and have that audio coming out, so you can mix that in and have the audio coming out on the actual HDMI audio channel. Speaking of which, the audio channel is something we're still working on to actually get that out through the actual port as well. Okay, so that is the actual shifter board. I'm going to move on to the next one, the Blitter. So the Blitter is something that's difficult to get hold of. Again, there's not many of them out there. I think they're rocking about £100 at the moment out on the web if you want to get hold of them on eBay. And we wanted to sort of see if we could actually make the Blitter work, so we could actually replace them in here. So we started off doing a lot of sort of development with this. We had some dev boards we plugged into this development environment, which had like FPGAs on them. But the first one we had was this sort of yellow board that you can see here. And we've actually called it sparklophobia. Anyone who's put in Blitter into the forum as they're typing it in, it gets auto-corrected. And it gets auto-corrected to glitter. Sparklophobia is actually a phobia of glitter. So that's why we just called it. We name all our boards. It's me. I'm terrible at it. I just put these in. So yeah, it's called sparklophobia. I made it yellow, so it's sort of bright. And we basically got this one working. We've done a lot of work with Eagle. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, all the sort of work we did there. But that board is actually in this machine over here. It's been running all day, and it's basically 100% accurate, and it's basically working perfectly in there. We also wanted to make it smaller. I'm always doing this. I always want to try and fit these things in as small a board as possible. And we want to get it so that we can actually have these plug-in boards. You see the one at the bottom, these are sort of like a Blitter that you can plug. This one's for the H5. You can just plug it in and then just basically use it instead of having a Blitter. And we can do the similar one for the original STFM or whatever, and have that as just plug in. Of course, you have to solder it in because they don't have the actual socket in the STFM, so you may as well just solder it straight in. Okay. Right. So, 100% Blitter. I call it 100% Blitter because we've been playing with different cores. In here, we looked at Wolfgang's core, we looked at Eagle's core, been trying to get it in and sort of get it to work. And the furthest we got to is what we deemed as 98. Every time we were running the sort of gem bench scores, things that we were always getting like 98% on the blitting. It looked like it was working, all the sort of blitting operations, but we also had some test programs given to us by Cyprian, who's also on the forum, which are the ones across the bottom. You can actually see the difference between them. So I think I got them a bit mixed up, but yeah, when the patterns are actually nice, you know it's a good Blitter. When it's all sort of all out of whack, then the timings are wrong for different parts of the Blitter. So these were actually used to help us to see whether things were working. And we have many other programs to actually run to see if the Blitters were actually doing exactly as they were supposed to be doing. But with the help of Eagle, we managed to get this working. And now we have this Blitter FPGA core that we can put into this hardware and actually run and hopefully give it to the masses once we get through this whole chip shortage craziness that's going on. I think the chips originally, before the pandemic, that we were using the FPGAs were about £5, and I think now they're about £27 each. So it's quite a hike. So, okay. So yes, we call it sparklophobia. It's just an example of the chip. It's basically there's two versions. There's a PLCC one to fit in the H5. There's going to be a funky one which will fit in the pinout of the STFM. And it's 100% complete. Okay. By all means, you can ask questions as I'm going along. So continuing this journey, we started to also, started to. We've been doing this along all these sort of projects all at the same time. And they get stalled for different reasons and so forth. But we've also been looking at MMU and Glue. And this picture here is actually one of the FPGA dev boards. It's on top of another board which we call the shock absorber. So the shock absorber is just converting the 5 volt to the 3.3 volt. It's using the buffers there, but it plugs into the ST FM. And this allowed us to sort of quickly sort of just plug a board in, sort of play around with cores. And for the MMU and the Glue, we've been playing around with Wolfgang's cores. We managed to get like the MMU working. There was a few timing issues. It's not quite perfect. I think when we plugged the Glue in, it just didn't work at all.
I don't think we got the Glue to work, did we?
No, it was a timing issue. But now we've got Igor on board. We're going to sort of work with Igor to sort of try and get his cores working on these as well. And, you know, I think we did actually get it with Glue, but it just only got to the screen and then just bombed after that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Igor has sort of started to work with us to help move this forward, and hopefully we'll get to the same stage as we did with the Blitter. We'll get to the same stage as we have with the MMU, same stage we have with the Glue, and then we can reduce it down into that smaller chip footprint so that we can actually do replacements from that. So, the Phoenix MGB. It's not a car. I've started naming things again. So, that board that you saw from the Sparklophobia, the pinouts are pretty much just shifted around slightly between the MMU, between the Glue, between the Blitter. And when we were actually doing the shock absorber one, the sort of plug-in one, that shock absorber, you could actually just have a couple of jumpers and switch it between them. So what we're actually looking with the Phoenix MGB board is that board, you can plug it into either MMU, Glue, or Blitter, depending on what core you've actually got on that board, and you just plug it in there. So we can actually use the same board for any one of those 3 chips, basically. So going forward, what are we going to do? Well, where do we stop? We've got to stop somewhere with this FPGA. We want to make sure it's 100% compatible. We want to make sure you can play your original games, do your original stuff. We don't want to go down too far where everything goes into an FPGA chip, because you end up having a MIST or a MISTer type of device. So we want to keep it original, plug it into the original systems, but we want to take it a little bit further. So maybe we should do what Atari was doing. Actually, they were starting to combine some of the chips together, like the GST. They were bringing the shifter and things like that. And there's a whole thread about this that Exxos has kicked off on the forum where we were talking about what should we do and things like that. But I think we want to have originality, so you can run it in the original way, but we also want to enhance it so you can have additional things on top of that, like you saw with like audio, but we can also add things to the shifter like more palette, like the STE has. We can add other things with the sound DMA. I know Exxos has got a lot of things on sound that he wants to do. But we want to expand it and have it so that you can either run it stock, or we can actually do a few extra things within there as well. And I know there's been talk about people taking the Blitter and doing more things with the Blitter and stuff like that. Okay. So we are thinking about a Phoenix GST. So the idea is that we have a board that we can plug in to the 3 chips on the H5 board, which would have been the MMU, Glue, and the Blitter. We can just plug it straight in, and then we can actually do all those functions. We can bring in MMU, we can bring in Glue, we can bring in Blitter, we can bring in the shifter, all into that one board. But you still got the original hardware underneath, but then you can take it to another level. So we've gone a little bit further than STE. It's the Phoenix platform, a bit more enhanced. This is a bit utopia. We've got a long way to go to get here. We just need to get the actual cores working, the original ones. Then we can start thinking about expanding on them. So is there anything else we can FPGA? Well, there is. On the side, I've been working on a keyboard remake, and the actual chip for the keyboard is not easy to get hold of, but there is an FPGA core, which Till, basically of the MIST era, had created. He suggested we actually use that. So actually, you can see there's a footprint for an Intel Max 10 chip. So we could actually put that on there. Then you don't need to have the normal original chip. And then maybe we could do some additional things with the keyboard, which I have in mind, but I'm not showing at the moment. Okay. Questions? Not you. I'll come back to you.
You had an asterisk at one of your bullet points. Did you already kind of cover that in terms of like how far you're wanting to extend things? Was that kind of what the asterisk is for?
Yeah, we want to just do mostly the custom chips. The asterisk is really because here you can put FPGAs elsewhere. It just depends where. We don't want to put it everywhere because you could do like this 1772 chip. Yeah, someone's already done that and put that in there, and you can have that in the core. But you end up having a mister or a mist in the end. So where do you draw the line? It's a very difficult one, and you can't satisfy everyone. Everyone has those different sort of thought trains of some people want like the world bolted onto it. Some people want that purity. So it depends what you want to do. Okay, go on then, Chris.
When is Sparkophobia going to be available?
In your store. So we're just talking about that behind the scenes on the forum at the moment. So it's mostly about the cost of the chips, getting hold of some chips so we can start doing a little sort of beta run. I've got to spin a board out just to get that MGB board going. So as soon as I spun that out, as soon as we get some chips, they're not easy to solder because they're BGA chips as well. So we're having to sort of play around with that game, finding who can actually do the soldering of those. But as soon as we get all those things out of the way, then we can put them into Exxos store. Steve?
What's the possibility of having the Phoenix shifter program to support even higher resolutions and perhaps colors, and then the Phoenix OS being patched to have like an ultra high resolution mode, for instance?
That's an interesting question. So you may have seen on the forum, there's a couple of threads. One's about running the alpha board. I think it was in what we call true 16 megahertz mode, where you play around with the sort of clocks. But as you're actually moving it to there, it opens up like these higher resolutions that Trode, I think, showed on the forum as well. To do this, we need to have a faster bus. We can't do it on the 8 megahertz bus, so it's got to be faster. So that's where we're going. Hopefully, bring this upwards. Exxos, do you want to add to that?
Sorry?
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's just a bandwidth limitation as opposed to more the shifter. The shifter is just literally shifting the pixels on the screen. But for the high resolutions, you need, obviously as Icky says, you need the faster bus to shift the data to the shifter faster. That's where the high resolutions more comes from, the bandwidth as opposed to the shifter itself.
Okay. Mr. Bob Mazzilli.
Yeah, well, you've taken the wind from the sails. I was going to talk about or ask about the bus boosting, but while we're on the shifter, can something be done? Looking at the TT shifter, it grabs a bigger 64 chunk at a time. Can something like that be done? And that will alleviate bus speed as well.
That's a good question. I think, first off, we want to get it 100%, and then figure out what we can actually add on to it. I think, and Exxos and I always talk about this, there's not enough developers within the Atari ST community, and it'd be great if we could actually have something that we can start enhancing and adding to, and get more people involved to sort of start developing this. I know you're very interested in this space, but the more I think that we can start providing a chip to expand these things and get developers to start developing, it'd be brilliant.
Apologies if I missed it. I was missing out. But you were talking about you working on the audio issues still. And so what exactly are you encountering there? And is this on sort of analog side or the digital side? It's
so we've got an analog to digital mixer converter chip on board that you can put the audio into, and then it converts it to a digital stream. Then you need to take the digital stream and actually mux it into the HDMI That's the piece we're currently sort of fiddling about with at the moment. Well,
Just that
I am.
final step.
Yeah. It's finding time to do it. You know what it's like with projects. Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay. Oh, no, one.
The only thing I can think of is the keyboard. When's that going to be?
That's a long way off. So the keyboard I have here, it's basically all the keycaps are off of an Omega ST keyboard. I've been trying to source somewhere that would actually do them. I have found somewhere, but it's really, really expensive because I've got to do all the molds and so forth. The worst ones are actually the enter key, because it's very different than any other keyboard, and also the function keys. There's no other molds out there. That board that I've got there, I've got a little problem with the schematic. The actual joystick and the mouse is the wrong way around, so I need to do a spin of another version. But it's not far off, it's just really about the keycaps. Yeah. Okay.
Will it be available in pink?
Pink?
Only available in pink.
Only for Exxos.
Everyone's getting a pink one, whether they want one or not.
Okay. Stephen?
With regards to the shifter, SU and bandwidth, have you thought about having onboard RAM that mirrors the system RAM? It literally listens to the bus, is right to the screen area, right to an internal memory, and then uses this internal memory rather than system memory for the readout to the display.
I think that's similar to the, what's the card called? The Viking card? I think it had its own RAM and you could write to it and actually display out.
It's just, if they listen to the bus, there's a write to screen memory, and then write it to duplicate the write to its own internal memory.
Yeah, but bus sniffing.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a long way off, these sort of things. I think we need to get it working and then figure out what's possible. But I think this is where on the forum, we can sort of discuss and figure out, I think once we've actually got a platform that we can start to work on, then it's like, where can we go from here? Can we plug this onto the FPGA? Can we get this working with it and so on?
I don't think the shifter actually knows the memory anyway, does it? It just gets told read
Yes.
now.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.